Yeah. So rock house is coming along real good. That's what I named my cabin because there was so much rock involved. I got my fish, got my berries, got my roots. Things are looking good, but you know, winter's a long time. I know I need way more food than I even have at this point. I mean, I'm looking good, but it ain't in the bag. I'm up on the plateau. I'm picking root that day. It's getting late. Kind of cold that day. More than kind of cold. I got cold. You know, digging root, you're in one spot, and my hands were okay for warm because you're digging with your hand, but my feet got cold. My feet got really cold that day. Dug a pretty good bundle. It takes hours to dig a bundle this size. My feet got cold, and I went for a walk to warm my feet up. And I hadn't really explored that plateau at all. As soon as I get up there, I start digging root. So I hadn't explored it, but I need to warm up my feet now. I need to walk. So I start looking around. I go down in this little gully. It's just a little depression. It ain't even a gully hardly. And there's some sand at the back of it. I mean, everything's so rocky. I see this sand and I'm like, that looks neat. I'm gonna go check this sand spot out. And when I get to that sand, there's a wallow. I'd never been around musk ox in my whole life. There's moose and sheep and bears and caribou where I'm at in Alaska. There ain't a whole lot of musk ox in Alaska, and there ain't none around me for sure. So I see this wallow where and I see hoof tracks, and I know they're not moose. And then I see a tree all mangled up where animals have been rubbing their heads against it like a moose would rub a tree. But it's low, it's way, you know, moose rub high. And I'm thinking and then I see that big long wool stuck in the pitch. This is a musk ox wallow. It's a musk ox, maybe it ain't called a wallow, you know, where they get sand and lay in it. I don't know what it'd be called if it wasn't a wallow. We would call it a wallow. But it didn't look real fresh. But I'm like, well, at least when they come through, they hit this spot, you know. I'm a little bit excited about what I'm seeing. But hunting's a tough deal. At this point, now I should mention this. At this point, I had resigned myself to not getting a big game animal. I felt like I had the worst spot. Moose, I'm thinking moose. I ain't even thinking musk ox. Because I know they're herd animals and the chances of bumping into a whole herd are slim. Like a herd will use 50 square miles, but they can be anywhere in that 50 square miles. Whereas a population of moose, they don't necessarily herd up, and there could be 5 or 6 moose in 50 square miles. You know, your chances of bumping into them are way better because they're spread out. You know, if there's a herd in 50 or 100 miles, the chances of bumping into that herd are kind of slim. I never thought musk ox was a possibility. I'm looking for moose. I'm a moose hunter. So I'm just warming my feet up and I see there's some musk ox sign. Looks heartening, but you know, I ain't expecting musk ox to jump out of the bushes. And then, as a lot of times when I'm hiking around, I'll go further than so that led me on to go look at, and there's a high point in the rock, and I go up to that high point for a look around. By now, I'm like a half mile from my outfit where I was digging root. So like I was saying, I had resigned myself to not getting a big game animal. But at the same time, I've lived in the woods long enough, I know how shit goes. If you ain't got your gun, if you ain't got your bow, whatever, that's when you'll see your opportunity. So even though I pretty much had made my mind up that I wasn't going to get big game in this spot, and I'm still mad about that at this point, I took my bow every day, because I know if you don't take your bow, then you definitely ain't going to get big game. No matter what you're doing, you take your bow. The only time I did not take my bow every day is if I had a building project and I had to take my axe, because I couldn't carry both and all the camera bullshit. But I didn't have my axe this day, I had my bow. Well, instead of carrying all my arrows, I was I took 2 arrows every day. I had got my bow and I got 2 arrows. That's all I'm carrying, because I can hold 2 arrows right here where I hold my bow. And I'll show that later when I get into gear. You know, you can carry 2 arrows right here on your handle and still be really mobile without a quiver and shit bouncing around on you. Well, that's all down at where I was digging root. So I'm still just warming up my feet. My feet are warm by now, but I'm exploring the top. And I see some stuff that I want to come up and try to go for later, some rosehip patches and some grass that I want to collect for later in winter when it gets cold. And there's just rock and boulders and stuff everywhere, and it's all burnt. And I see this one boulder that just don't look right. Looks really big and 3-dimensional to me, and I'm looking at it. And then I think I see it shift around. No binoculars, of course, you know, this is a primitive situation. Binoculars ain't part of our 10 items. And it's out there a little ways. And so I watch it and I'm like, that is a musk ox. Holy shit, I can't believe it. I mean, I'm looking at a musk ox right now. Hadn't expected to see one. I was thinking moose or bear or something. And now here I am up on this plateau, and it ain't even a herd, it's a lone musk ox. Which, to anybody that's done a lot of hunting, they understand my excitement over a lone animal. To sneak up on a herd is almost impossible. Too many eyes, too many ears, too many noses. You know, there's just too many animals to disturb. Whereas a lone animal, you've got a chance of getting in close. You concentrate on what that one's doing, not what on 20 of them's doing. This is a lone musk ox. It's a rare thing. Musk ox are a herd animal. This is a lone giant bull. For whatever reason, he don't like living with the herd. He was the big bull and got kicked out that year, you know, because he's getting a little too old to wrestle with the younger ones. Maybe hates people like me. I don't know. He likes to live. He's alone. He's by himself. And the wind is perfect. The wind is coming from him straight to me. And he's just grazing. He ain't traveling. Like, you know, he could have had his head up and beelining for unknown parts unknown. He's got his head down feeding. Lone musk ox feeding. And my bow and arrow is a half mile behind me at where I was digging root. I watch him like 5 minutes and trotted back for my bow and arrow. I mean, that's how long it took me to make that decision, like 5 minutes. I made sure he was just kind of grazing. Okay, this son of a bitch is here. I'm going to get my bow and arrow. I ran clear back. By the time I got back, I'm winded. So, I mean, I moved in, I took my bow and arrow and started, and cameras, I remembered to grab my cameras. I didn't have my big camera that day. I mostly took big camera because I like the quality of the big camera. But this day I had my palm camera and my GoPro in my little communications bag with my yellow brick GPS unit they made us all carry. I shove them cameras in there, bow and arrow, boom, I go right back as quick as I can. He's still there. I couldn't run back. I'd ran down for my bow and I was winded. I couldn't run back. Plus it was uphill. But you know, I was hot-footing it. Get there, he's still in the same little bowl, just feeding. Wind's still perfect. Holy cow. I start praying. I start praying hard. Not that I didn't pray hard every day, but now I am locked into steady prayer. Dear God, dear Lord God Almighty, my Father in heaven, in Jesus Christ's name, deliver this animal into my hand. And I've said that prayer 100 times over the years when I got high dollar clients or I'm after a good animal. And I mean it every time, but this time, if there was ever a time you're going to give me an animal, this is the time, Lord. Put this animal into my hand. And I start stalking, start moving in. And I get close quick because, you know, he's still a little ways out there. I cut half the distance with even trying to hide. But then as I'm approaching within the 300 or 400 yard mark, I start, you stalk in increments. If your animal's out there 500 yards, you pick your next 100 yard or 50 yard mark of cover, and when he ain't facing you and the wind's right, you move to that, and then you reassess. And I started doing that, and I started getting really close. I got these cameras on me. The professional in me wants to record this damn thing too, because I want to be on TV. And I fought down there. I thought, don't even cameras, you dumb bastard. Concentrate on killing this thing and then film it. And so I left the cameras in their pouch, and I got really close at one point. Well, see, he was in a little bit of open, but a musk ox is pretty wide at the back and then all that fur. So when he's grazing, when he was grazing away, and when his ass was between me and his head, so to speak, when I couldn't see his head or his horns or nothing, I could only see his ass, I would move. Because I knew he couldn't see me, he's pointing that way. But then if I would see his shoulders shift to one side of his ass or the other, I'd know which way he was headed, and I'd stalk to whatever side he was shifting from. Worked great. I got close, really close. I got to within 50 yards, which is close. Wide open at this point between me and him. 50 yards ain't much cover. And I still was resisting. I thought, I set the camera up. I thought, no, camera. And he went broadside at 50 yards. Now that is a little bit of a far shot for a stick bow. I'm shooting a 55-pound Fred Bear Montana longbow. And I had been shooting at 50 yards, but at 50 yards, you're losing some swoop and your aim. I mean, anything after 50 yards is getting dicey with a bow, even a compound bow. But he went full broadside at 50 yards, and I'm not a hesitator. I've hesitated in the past as a younger man, and I know hesitating ain't cool. You can miss your shot by not taking it. But the stock was going so good. He went broadside. I'm thinking, I ain't even got my bow up, but I'm thinking, I got one on me, but it ain't drawn. I'm thinking, boy, that's the shot, take the shot. And then he started, okay, I'll move up one more time. And I was getting so close, the heard me. He heard me step on a stick or something. I don't know what he heard, because he couldn't win me. The wind's good. Didn't see me. I know he didn't see me. His head was turned away. He heard me, and he gave a little start and trotted off 20 or 30 yards. Now he's 100, or now he's 70 or 80 yards, And he did the white-tailed deer thing. Now, come to find out, musk ox are a little denser than a deer. Actually, there's very few things as smart as a white-tailed deer in the wild. But he did that white-tailed deer thing where they stop and they look where they think there's trouble. And they just lock up and they focus on that. I mean, he has me wide open and he's locked up watching me. I'm like, shit, oh man, that was the shot. That was the shot. You dumb didn't take the shot. Had this happen, I've had this happen before. Any hunter has. All you hunters know exactly what I'm talking about. So all I can do is lock up and wait for him to quit watching me. And then he goes back to grazing. But as he grazes now, instead of staying down, grazing, he'll graze a little bit and then he'll stop and look up and look behind him. He knowed something. He knowed he heard something, even though he didn't quite figure out what it was. So I never could close that 50-yard distance. I stayed with him. I'm bitching at myself. I'm still praying, oh Lord, give me this animal. And now he's, I can't never hardly get within 100 yards again. I blew the stock. And I'm kicking myself in the ass. And it was tempting, sometimes mentally, when you think you've blown it, you lose hope, But there I am. I'm up on the plateau with my bow and arrow, and here's the only big game animal I've had a good chance at yet. I'm like, man, you can't give up. You got to haze this thing until it blows clear out of the country, until you kill it. I mean, you got to stay in the game. I just keep, every time it goes up over a little outcrop and disappears from sight, I move up. Every time it goes behind a bush or feeds the right way, I move up. Then it spooks and moves away, but it never did blow clear out of the country. It just kept me at 100 yards all afternoon. This went on for 2 or 3 hours. Now it's getting a little bit late. Good thing I was up there early. So it's going down, then the place is burnt. It's going down this rock finger, grazing. Even though it's rock, there's a lot of graze up there. You wouldn't believe that, but there is. And the whole place is burnt, but there's this one finger of spruce, we call it G-pole where I'm from in Alaska, just small black spruce that don't get big. 10 to 20 feet high. Moss. And he's coming down this rock ridge a little higher than that, and where I was at, I could parallel him with this green strip between us. It was the first good cover I had encountered with him in an advantageous spot. And he's feeding a good way to where the wind's always coming my way, and I'm staying back 100 yards on the other side of this green strip of trees that ain't been burnt. And then he hit a really thick spot where he couldn't see at all, and the wind was good, and I moved up 100 yards ahead of him. And lo and behold, there was a opening through that shit straight over to where he's gonna come if he kept coming on his original course. I stepped into that opening through some of the green, cut half the distance to where I thought maybe he was gonna come out at 100 yards or 50 yards. And you know, we've been doing this all day. Now I'm ready. I don't care if it's 50 yards, I don't care if it's 60, whatever it is, when he hits that opening, I'm shooting. Fed right into it. The big beautiful bastard fed right into it. He's still stopping and looking behind him, but I'm ahead of him now. He hits that opening. When I shoot my bow, from the bow side, you know, I got my arrow on the left side of the bow, and my arrows, no matter what I do, when I'm shooting freehanded, my arrows always come off hard to the left. That's just how I shoot. And I've shot enough that I know that. So when this thing hits that opening, I gotta compensate for the distance. I gotta aim high, and I gotta aim right, because I know my arrows come off left. And the further the distance, the more left it drifts. So when he hit that opening, I put it over his back and clear up by his head. Let loose. It soared perfectly right and left. But it must only been 30 yards. I thought it was 50. You know, we don't got rangefinders or nothing. Whatever happened, I shot high. It went right over the vitals. It went right in the vital zone, but over the top of his back, I compensated too high. And generally on a long shot, they always fall short, but I aimed a little too high. I mean, it just barely went over the top of his back. Would have been a perfect heart-lung shot. Went over, hit the rock behind him, clattered, and he jumped and looked that way. I had my other arrow, I only got 2. I notched the other one, boom, just didn't even think about nothing at that point. Shot. I remembered to shoot lower because I just shot high, but I forgot to compensate to the right. Hits him right, bam! Hits hard, good. You know, I was full draw. You know, sometimes you can let loose too early on a quick shot. I had it clear back to where my whole 55-pound bow was effective, and right in the ham. Ass shot. And he just jumped again. You know, mostly that's a bad shot. Thank God Almighty in Jesus Christ's name, that arrow hit right behind the back knee, where the giant artery comes from the inside of the leg to the back of the calf, severed the main artery, the main highway in that thing's back leg. And as soon as he turned and jumped, it was like somebody turned a blood spigot on in his leg. I actually was standing there watching the blood stream out of that animal's leg. It was like a fucking spigot. I felt good about that, because all the blood in that animal's body has to pass that point. Your blood's a continuous circuit. But on the other hand, he can still run a mile or two and get away from you. And then he does gallop off. And I'm just sitting there, like, not sitting there, I'm standing there in that little moss bog in that chute, thinking this might be good. You know, I might have just killed this thing. Well, he's gonna die, but whether you find him or not. So I go up and there's blood. Now, I've been on a lot of blood trails in my life. A speck or two ain't good. Even a little patch or two every 20 yards ain't so good. But there's them blood trails, and all you hunters know this, there's them blood trails you get on that are this wide and continuous. You know that animal's dead. And that's what this kind of blood trail was. It was a big, wide, heavy, red blood trail up on the grass, up on the bushes. It was that blood trail everybody's always looking for. And then I picked up the other arrow I'd shot. Well, the tip had got knocked off because it hit the rock. It was a broken arrow. The arrow was good, but the broadhead was snapped right off at the tip. Actually, it took the whole main blade, and all I had was the bleeder blades on it with a blunt tip. And I start taking the trail. It ain't hard to follow. And took it like probably a half mile. And then I see him. Well, you know, it's cliffy and rocky. It's places you would never expect an animal that size to go. I mean, it's rough terrain. And he bedded down in a little crevice on this big cliff face, and the wind was wrong there. I couldn't approach him from the way he went in, or it would have spooked him. So I tried to engine around the cliff and then get up under him and make maybe a killing shot. I had a broken arrow. He's got my good arrow in him. It's still in his ass. So I'm going around, and I can just see him, and I did film a little bit of that. But it ain't right. I can't get the shot. It's a bad arrow. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm heading back to where I initially seen him, and I don't know what I'm going to do at this point. Well, when I'm heading back, I see another one. I see another musk ox going down this little ravine thing. I'm like, there's another one. But then I look, and it's him. I see my arrow in him. He got, somehow when I went around the cliff to get back in place, I don't think he smelled me. I think he was just making a last attempt to move on. So I run up and then he disappears down over some timber and a stone. And I did set my camera up and capture that. He disappears. Big musk ox, arrow in his ass on a rock outcrop before he ducks down into some timber. So I go to that point, and it looks like the way you would think he went was just evident. And I went that way without following the blood trail, and pretty soon I'm off the blood trail. This is all happening just quick. And then I see it up ahead, down in a steep little gut, and it's burnt there. Lots of down timber. It was having trouble getting over some down timber, and it's down in this little kind of hiding spot. Not laying on its side, it's just kind of down and looking around. I still got my broken arrow. My good arrow's in it. I get up close from, I don't know, I probably got within 20 yards or 15 yards. I was pretty close. 15 yards at least. That's how close. Maybe 10. I got really close because it was facing away and the wind was good again. I set my camera all up. Oh, this is the killing shot. Took my broken arrow, forgot to aim low and hit it high. I hit him, but it hit high up on the shoulder. Well, their shoulders all meat and bone, and broken arrow damn sure ain't going through it. But the camera got the hit. He jumps up and shakes, and just my arrow falls out. But he laid back down. I seen my good arrow in his ass bleeding all to hell, and he was so weak from blood loss that he didn't run. He just went right back down in his bed after that broken arrow hit. So now I'm thinking, yeah, I got this. But now I don't got no arrow, nothing. I just shot my broken arrow at him, and he shook it out, but he laid on it, plus he has the one in his ass he's laying on. I got a bow and no arrow. Camera's all set up. We're a long way from camp, getting late. And so I'm just sitting there watching this thing. It's breathing heavy. It's lost enough blood. It's actually breathing heavy, even though it wasn't a lung hit. Lost a lot of blood. But you know, wild animals don't know they're gonna die. This thing might sit there and do that all night. I sat there 20 minutes or so. We didn't gotta watch. I got my bow. This thing's sitting there, breathing heavy. I got no arrows. I got my belt knife on my hip. I get that belt knife out in my hand, and this thing's 10 yards away. But it's a 900-pound bull musk ox. Even though it's mortally wounded, it is a very large, strong, capable animal. I got a 9-inch belt knife. I think to myself, you know, this is the $1 Million Musk Ox right here in front of me. It might have been a crazy hunt and I made some bad shots, but now here I am and here he is. He ain't getting up, but he ain't dead. And what am I gonna do? Sit here all night and camp out with him? And go back and come back tomorrow and look for him? I ain't gonna do that. So it's either sit here all night with this thing, which I didn't really feel like doing, and even that could be hit or miss, or I can take this belt knife and go in and stab this thing to death right now. Made up my mind I was going to do that. Got my camera on him. Now I had my GoPro in my bag. Put my GoPro on my head. I hadn't wore it the whole time. And GoPro batteries don't last long, and neither do these palm cameras. So if I would have shot him all that time that I made myself not, I'd have hit this point with dead batteries. So since I held back from doing that, which turned out to be a good thing, I got him in where I want him. Now I got full batteries. Palm camera set up, put the GoPro on my head with full batteries. You know, I got the knife out here. Now I'm wondering, okay, should I have the knife edge that way, up, or should I have the knife down? You know, do I want to go in like this, or do I want to go in like this? Feels more natural to me going in like this through my whole life. But that all going through my head. Got my thong around my wrist. My knife had thong. That way when he gets up, I know he's going to get up when I go in and hit him. It's going to be like a rodeo, that first hit. I know that. So I got my thong around my wrist so that when something happens, I don't lose my knife, and then I don't even have that. Like this or like this. Okay, we're going in like this. GoPro's on. We're rolling. I sneak in. Now he's looking away from me and he's weak, but I get within 3 quick steps of where his side is. You know, and I want to be low by the heart. And you know, it's like cutting down a giant tree. When you're cutting and it's about ready to go, you already got your escape route picked. Well, I did this the same way. I thought I'm gonna go in and I'm gonna stab out, and you know, I'm peeling off this way when that thing gets up and spins. By the time he gets out of his bed and he's spinning around to meet the attack, I'm already heading this way. Bam, I did it. Bump, 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 3 steps, jab, behind the front shoulder in the heart area. And you know, I never even stopped the jab. I jabbed on the run and I'm already going. He came up out of there like a rodeo bull. Like he wasn't even wounded. He come up out and spin, and that giant boss come around. And you know, I'm looking behind me now, got it on GoPro. But you know, I'm 3 or 4 jumps ahead of him. Weak enough, he goes back down. Man, my heart is, this is like nothing. You can't describe this by stabbing this musk ox. He's right, but he ain't dead now. You know, he still ain't dead. The same scenario. I stalk into 3 steps, have my move planned right by the same area I hit before. Stab, moving away. He comes out, and you know, he's trying to swing around and hook me, but I ain't there. I'm flipping and tumbling down through the blowdown. You know, it's all fire blowdown. You know, you're running, but you're also falling and leaping and jumping. Main thing is I got away from him. Back down in his bed he goes. Back down. So this time he went down in such a way, or maybe I was on the other side of him at this time. I know he ain't getting away, but he's still far from dead. I came in from another direction that time. Stabbed him again. He got up slower, not as quick. He quit breathing. I had a couple hours till dark yet. And at that point, right there, I knew I won Alone Season 7. I had a 900-pound musk ox, dead on the ground. We're 2.5 miles from camp. I went on to take 5 days to pack that thing in, and that's a whole story in itself. But I got big game. I got the musk ox on Alone Season 7. That's the $1 Million Musk Ox.